Hello guys, today we are going to take a look at Bless Online. I feel that this first impressions is a bit overdue because the game has been playable in Korea for quite some time and I've spent a lot of time playing it myself, even made a few videos on it but never really continued the Bless series like I thought I would. So with this first impressions and early game review, unlike a few previous impressions, this is a game where I spent days instead of just a few hours. However, what are days to me could be a day or less to a Korean player who actually understands the game. Most of you probably know or have heard of Bless, and if so, you also heard about the combat. Everywhere I see a post about Bless, I see a negative comment about the combat. And honestly, this is the reason I never made a first impressions, because I feel that Bless has a lot of potential and I didn't want to damage the game's rep. The thing is, the combat got better for me when switching classes, and I'll explain more as we get through this impressions, but overall I highly doubt that the combat will change because it would mean they'd have to redo the whole combat system. And with the game already heading to the west, I believe early next year, I just can't see this happening. So in this video we'll talk about my experience with Bless, features of the game, the combat, my final thoughts and more, but keep in mind that this is all my opinion and the game is in Korean. Even when I was using the English patch, I had a hard time understanding stuff, but questing and progressing is pretty easy, so I never really got stuck. My reason for saying this is that there might be features I don't speak of or some things that I tell you might not be accurate. I also did not reach the end game, and as you know, that could change the whole experience for you. Everything before max cap feels like an introduction, and then it feels like the game is finally starting, but this isn't always the case. It could be for Bless though. I'll also be using footage from past videos just to show you more of the game and what to expect, since I wasn't able to capture every feature after recently formatting my SSD and hard drive. So when you first create your character in Bless, you have 8 different classes to choose from: a Guardian, Berserker, Paladin, Ranger, Assassin, Mage, Warlock, and Mystic. So you have elves, a human, small furry dude, and big furry dude. Yes, you can also be female furries as well, but it's nice to see a game that actually gives you different races to choose from, and unique ones at that. There are 8 races, but it's more like 4 races with minor changes and different names when choosing a different faction. Only certain races can be certain classes. Now, for my first time around, I chose an elf assassin, but then I chose to go with a berserker to get a different feel for the combat, and I chose to play as the small furry race because it seems more badass to get destroyed by this little guy wielding a giant axe or hammer than your typical muscular berserker. But here you're going to see me create a new character just so I can show you guys the character customization. So as you can see, it gets pretty detailed. It also just looks really nice. The interface is so clean. They have lots of sliders. You can mess around with different parts of the body. It's very in-depth. I'd put this character customization up there with some of the best I've seen. Not as complex and as detailed as Black Desert, but it's up there. After creating your character, you get to choose a faction, either the red side or the blue side. And I love factions. Why? Because I love PvP, and having different factions pretty much means there will always be targets for you in a game like this with a massive open world where open world PK is enabled. When a game doesn't have factions yet it has open world PvP, it usually comes down to PKing and getting punished for it, in which some situations is fair, depends on the PK system, or it comes down to guild politics, and with that comes a lot of drama, personal attacks. It just gets really toxic. While every MMORPG with open world PvP that I've played gets toxic, the ones with faction versus faction like ArcheAge usually has less in these open world situations. Are you fucking kidding me? Did you just tell me that ArcheAge isn't toxic? Well, in a faction versus faction game, it's known that you are a constant target, not because of the guild you are in or because you're in someone's way. You just walk around with a flag on your head saying, hey, come at me. And I like that. Not where you have to choose your fights based on guilds and drama, though that will still be a thing in a game like this. Once you actually get into the game, what's cool is that each race starts in their own town or city and has their own backstory and beginning quest line. As an elf, I started off in an area surrounded by water, and I had to fight off diseased zombie-like enemies and evil spirits. There was some cool cutscene, and I seemed to play an important role in some story. With the smaller race, I started off on a flying ship, fighting off these bugs. Then I land in my steampunk-like town and fight off slimes and mechanical inventions. After reaching a certain level or point in your story, you end up in the main world of Bless. The huge open world that seems to follow the same savanna, desert-like dry forest theme. And the world is huge, but from what I've seen and explored, it all just feels dry and boring. There might be snowy areas or places filled with lava, but from what I've seen, it's all kind of been the same. Sometimes when you guys watch my videos, you say, the game looks pretty dead, and most of the time this is due to me playing while the local players are asleep. But in this game, it has felt dead no matter what time I played. I see a few players here and there, but never found a main hub where tons of Korean players hang out. A friend of mine always talks about Bless and has nothing but good things to say about it. He has reached the end game, and at level 30 or 35, I believe you can participate in sieges, which are these large-scale battles where factions fight each other daily, and he's always telling me I need to try out the sieges, and then my opinions of Bless might change. This is where Bless is really supposed to shine, the large-scale PvP. There's even videos of contested boss fights that you can find on Steparu's channel, and I do think this is where Bless becomes fun. But before that, you're pretty much just questing. Very generic questing as well. Gather 4 plants, slay 10 mobs, run there, run back. But what makes this super tedious is that every time you kill a mob, you unlock a new quest to kill X amount of that mob. So just imagine someone with OCD, like me, who's just like, fuck. It just kind of drives me nuts. And they do give extra experience, which is nice, but sometimes it doesn't feel worth it. Playing as the assassin, the combat was pretty much tab targeting, and when fighting mobs, most of the time they would feel like a Dark Souls boss fight. I would get extremely bored pulling one mob at a time. With the Berserker, it was much better. At first I was like, wow, the combat isn't always boring. The Berserker is more action combat. You still select targets, but it gives you much more freedom, swinging and slamming your weapons, and I don't know, but it just felt so much better than playing the assassin that I couldn't go back. But still, the questing is really boring, and this dry, dead looking world doesn't make it any better. One of the cool features of the game is that you can tame almost or maybe every single enemy and turn them into a pet that follows you around and has certain perks like bonus experience or gold gain, or they'll turn into a mount that you can ride around, ground or flying, and last they can turn into a minion. You can send them on these quests to gather materials and stuff, which is pretty cool, and you can upgrade them by sacrificing other pets to level them. It's kind of like Brave Frontier if anyone has played that mobile game. You tame these monsters by using a scroll, and there are different scrolls, so you want to use a better scroll the higher the mob's level. It's also best to get them to low health. In Bless, your armor and weapons also change your appearance, and sometimes it makes a huge difference, and they do put a lot of detail into their weapons and armor, which I like. Now the dungeons in Bless are really hard. Even if you come across a level 20 dungeon and think you can solo it at level 25, you are wrong. You will get destroyed, so dungeons in Bless definitely take teamwork, and the dungeons also have really cool mechanics, like dodging certain attacks or traps in the room, or killing its minions before they reach a certain part of the room that triggers some type of healing effect on the boss. There was always some sort of mechanic to watch out for with the bosses. Bless does use the Trinity system, so a tank, DPS, and healer is required to have a good dungeon run. And whoever designed the dungeons also needs a raise, because the detail was amazing. As far as the optimization goes, I've stuck with the same graphics card, a 970, but I've switched from an AMD 8350 CPU to an Intel i7, and the world still seems to have a lot of pop-in. It's understandable because on max graphics there is a ton of detail, and there's so much trying to load in at once, especially with how far you can see in the distance. It could be my specs, but I really just think it's because there's so much trying to load in the environment constantly that it never felt smooth. And I mean smooth like butter. The game runs great, but in the open world I never had that, 120 FPS feeling. I believe there is some story going on as you see familiar faces and get thrown into instances and watch cutscenes, but it never felt really important like the introduction to the game, depending on the character or race you choose. And yeah, sure, I can't understand what's going on, but I couldn't understand Blade and Soul or Revelation when I first played them, and I could tell the story was interesting, or at least that they put a lot into it and made it an obvious focus of the game. With Bless's story so far, I feel like so overall, from my experience with Bless, I have not reached the end game, but from what I've played and done in the game, Bless seems like a very traditional game. Is it really bringing something different to the table to make this game the next big MMO? Not really, but I do think it could revive that faction versus faction PvP, and after playing ArcAge and coming across Bless, I just knew this would be the next big thing for ArcAge players. But after a while, the combat had me rethinking that statement I made in a previous video. I haven't tried the sieges yet, and maybe I will in the future, and I'll do a video on them. And I'm sure when I do, I'll either find that Bless is a lot more fun than I think, or my feelings will remain the same, which isn't bad. It's just that this isn't the best MMO I've played, or the next big thing in my opinion. With more players running around, populated sieges, faction fights, and more, I'm sure my love for Bless will only grow, which will probably happen when the game hits the West. For now though, I think old school players, or those who appreciate dungeons with mechanics, the Trinity system, slow questing, and don't have super high standards for combat will love and appreciate this game. Would I recommend Bless to my viewers? When this game comes to the West, I definitely think you should give it a try. I don't recommend playing it on the Korean servers though, because you won't understand everything, and group content is pretty important. Without a group, you won't get to experience the dungeons, so it will be questing simulator for you. Could it be the next big thing? Maybe for faction versus faction PvP lovers, and depending on how Area handles it. But with the current state of MMOs and dissatisfaction most players have with the current games of the genre, my hopes aren't high for this one, but the honeymoon period is always fun, right? So let me know what you guys think about Bless. Is this a game you're looking forward to? Have you played it? And if so, what did you think about it? I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. See you soon, friends.